Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Jamin Shively here, and we're broadcasting live from Seattle, Washington, and I'm here with my colleague and co-host, Michael. And Michael, why don't you tell us a little bit about where you're at right now?
Yeah, Michael here in the south of France, in the city of Nîmes, where denim comes from.
Yeah, cool. Awesome.
Yep, just passing through.
Okay, very good. Well, what we're working on today, we're looking at the page Radical Collective Intelligence on radish.org. And I'll just go into screen share mode here to look at some of the latest stuff that we've posted. And the idea is that this video can be kind of like complementary to that. We're not even sure that we're going to post this video or not, but at least that's the idea if we do. Michael, can you see the text on the screen here?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So this is adding to the first few paragraphs that we have on Radical Collective Intelligence, which, by the way, is the same stuff that we put up on Ichi about Radical Collective Intelligence. And, that just to skim through that super quick, that's basically saying, we're building off the homepage of Radish that talks about CI and RCI. And then but here's kind of, an additional perspective focused on implementation. We talk about conversation and connection technologies to empower people to come together and self-organize, guided by the holistic aim, or telos, giving rise to a teleological taxonomy of topics spanning the world's resources, problems, and untapped opportunities. And that RCI leverages all those communication and technology and connection technologies, a whole bunch of technologies, in fact, and so that people can form what we call special teams of people to focus on specific goals or sub-goals, or any topic imaginable, really. And then they hold recorded video conferences, giving us perfect memory of their conversations, and complementing whatever stuff whatever text they post online, using more discussion forum like modes of communication. So really, we're envisioning sort of a mashup of modes of communication. Anyway, now we take it a bit deeper and we say that at a very high level, in creating Radical Collective Intelligence, we're combining the following resources, tools, and perspectives into an integrated whole. So there's like 9 things on this list. And first I'll just kind of list them, and then we'll get into the conversation.
Okay.
So teleological taxonomy of all of the needs and problems facing humanity and our planet as a whole, where the telos would be whole world, just like before. Separate teleological taxonomies for all the world's resources and the world's great untapped opportunities. So now we're talking about 3 different taxonomies. One for needs and problems. And actually, needs and problems, if you consider problems, what is a problem but the need to solve it? So really, we could just talk about all needs. Like, for example, humanity has the need for food. Well, the planet has the need for reversing climate change. So the problem is climate change. The need is to reverse it. I'm just making the simple point that we could just talk.
Yeah, I agree. It's a problem is an unmet need.
There you go. Yeah. So we have needs, then we have resources, and then we have untapped opportunities, which are kind of different things. And those are, solutions live in that realm of untapped opportunities. A solution is an untapped opportunity. And so we have these 3 teleological taxonomies. And then we also have other information organization technologies, like the transcription and indexing of recorded conversations, taxonomies themselves, etc. And then I added to the list brainstorming, another great work done by Dr. Tony McCaffrey. Then the outstanding book, Reinventing Discovery by Michael Nielsen. We talk about that below. Then we talk about connection technologies, a set of technologies designed and implemented to enable and empower new connections to be formed between people and people, people and topics, people and specific challenges, which are topics themselves, and then also topics and topics, using connection technologies to connect topics. And then conversation technologies. As people and topics are connected together, conversation technologies empower them to converse and co-create in new and powerful ways, like, for example, recorded video conferences, which empower people from diverse backgrounds located at different places around the world to come together and co-create, such that their creations and the very processes which resulted in these creations are all stored in a form of perfect memory, which in turn is indexed, searchable, and also intentionally located in the appropriate place, or topos, or topology, within the greater topology of teleological taxonomies, comprising the known universe of topics, people, conversations, needs, and problems, resources, opportunities, etc., etc. And another element is global holistic modeling, systematically mapping whatever proposed solution to all the various needs, problems, etc., that the solution impacts, both positively and negatively. And we talk about that below as well. And then we talk about the virtuous cycle between the maturation, evolution, and exponential growth of radical collective intelligence, the design and implementation of low-hanging fruit solutions, which we start with, like ending hunger, like the Hungerless Games, and then the growing popularity and success of these low-hanging fruit solutions, which in turn will drive more people, inspire more people to join the radical collective intelligence and cause the virtuous cycle to go even further. So that's where I start in this conversation, is the virtuous cycle. And the low-hanging fruit solutions that we're putting forward are those of the Hungerless Games, including but not limited to the very first of those out of the gate, which are Community Cafe, Compassionate Community, Sato Hemp, and Triple C. And the gist of the Hungerless Games is by creating an entirely new sector of the global economy, defined by Triple C and led by Sato Hemp, and under the name Compassionate Economy, we're providing an irresistible vehicle and strategy for permanently eradicating world hunger holistically. And because who's going to be able to resist this plan and this strategy for permanently eradicating world hunger?
Not me.
Yeah, exactly. Here, let me go to video for a second, just so we can kind of see each other. So I've listed a bunch of the elements that make up radical. I mean, it's kind of like we're taking different approaches. It's at how to describe this thing, right? My latest approach now is a list of bullets of the different elements. What we did last week, that's in the deep, that's in the rooting down deep into radical collective intelligence, or diving deep, or whatever. That page on Radish, that, of course, goes off, building kind of from the bottom up using the brainstorming technique. Now I'm kind of taking sort of a bit of a top-down approach where we say, there's this here's all these elements, and my hope is that people over time are starting to get a feel for what this radical collective intelligence is, what it constitutes. But the virtuous cycle part of it, I think, is a really key part, because that's where the rubber hits the road, where we're actually taking action in the real world to implement some of what I call these low-hanging fruit solutions. They may not be the most sophisticated, the most brilliant solutions. They may be pretty straightforward, and they're certainly not complete. In other words, we're not pretending that with the Hungerless Games and with the solutions that we're implementing right now, that that, oh yeah, this is going to solve everything. No, this is just the beginning, right? But
praxis makes perfect.
Praxis makes perfect. Exactly. So now getting back to, let me go back to the text here. Present to everyone. Okay. Okay, and you can see the text again, I presume.
Yep.
With the success of the Hungerless Game strategy and its constituent platforms and programs, including the 4 listed above, we will generate massive attention at a global scale, including mass media coverage, social media coverage, and perhaps most importantly, water cooler coverage. People just getting together and talking about this new thing, right? And the massive attention and interest will drive membership on Radish, Ichi, and many other platforms promoting, developing, and implementing collective intelligence. Take Radish collective intelligence, for example. The greater the number and diversity of our membership, the more powerful and efficient will be the solutions we develop, perfect, and implement. The better the solutions, the greater the net impacts on the world's needs and problems, such as ending hunger. The more progress we make towards ending hunger, the bigger the story, including the backstory, which is what you're reading presently, and the more popular all of these platforms, programs, and strategies become, because the people, more people talking about them, they become more popular, so more people join, and it's just a virtuous cycle. So now we kind of back up and look at the gist of Radish collective intelligence, and starting from the top of the teleological taxonomy of all the world's needs and problems, like we discussed. And of course, we talk about it in a lot more depth in Rooting Down Deep below. But basically, we break down the top level goal of having a whole world into the various specific needs which must be met for that uber goal, the top level goal of whole world, to be achieved. The specific, for example, the specific need of all of humanity having plenty to eat every day. And then I show the 4-minute video on brain swarming, and its example of removing ice from the power lines. And I make the point that, it's such a good video that they could have used any example, any problem, and it would have made the point. So well worth watching that video again and again. And then just consider that the entire teleological taxonomy of needs and problems, starting from the goal of whole world, can be broken down to problems as specific as the one of removing ice from power lines. Next, consider that the set of all solutions to the world's problems and unmet needs can be cast into a framework which builds on that 4-minute video above. Below the teleological taxonomy of all the world's unmet needs and problems. So you've got this huge taxonomy of, maybe hundreds of thousands or millions of specific needs that need to be met, like de-icing power lines. And then, just like in the 4-minute brainstorming video, we come from below with a separate teleological taxonomy of all the world's resources. So you have the needs coming from above, and then you have the resources coming from below, just like in the video. And remember how in the video they go from resources at the very bottom to solutions just above the resource level. And they create these solutions by combining resources in new and specific ways, like, for example, combining helicopters and de-icing chemicals at about minute 3 of the video. And those are called solutions. Combining different resources, you create solutions. And next, consider that each and every such solution, like the helicopters and the chemicals, to a given problem or goal has both intended consequences, achieving the goal, and unintended consequences, like chemical pollution, noise pollution, and other forms of pollution of the environment, in the case of using helicopters and de-icing agent as the solution. So now, at the big picture level, imagine that as we build out a taxonomy of all the possible solutions to all of the identified needs and problems in the teleological taxonomy, Imagine that for each such solution, we create a corresponding mapping. This is key. A mapping from the proposed solution to each and every one of the needs and problems which we're trying to address in the first place. We map the solution and all of its intended and unintended consequences. We map those together, okay, for each solution. The set of all such precisely quantified, parameterized mappings from each and every one of the potentially millions of proposed solutions to all the different needs and problems, that's a fundamental part of the global holistic modeling asset, wherein we propose to, this will enable us to project or forecast the complete set of impacts corresponding to any given scenario that we want to model. Well, what's a scenario? I define a scenario to be a complete specification of all the proposed solutions to be implemented, including a precise quantified degree to which each solution should be implemented, right? According to that scenario, right? Let me go to video so I can hand wave and we can see each other and we can.
Yeah, so you were breaking up a bit, so I turned my camera off and it seems to be working.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm sorry about that. Was there anything you need me to repeat?
No, because I was reading along.
Oh, very good. Okay, so it was just my voice.
And it didn't last long. I turned off my camera and it seemed to clear things up. So
okay, well, feel free to either leave it off or turn it back on, either way. But you can see me now, I presume.
Yeah, I can see. Yeah, I can see, and I could read the script.
Okay, good. So basically what we're talking about here is just using my hand. So coming from above, per the brain swarming technique, you've got your goal at the top. Well, of course, we've expanded it from one goal, de-icing power lines, to all the goals. My fingers representing the lowest level, leaves of the teleological taxonomy of needs. So each fingernail is one of these needs. And then, zero in on one, it's like the de-icing thing, and you can use the brain swarming method to come up with solutions. But what we're talking about is have all of the needs in view. And for each of those, and then it's kind of a matchmaking problem. Then from below, you've got all these resources, right? And then combining the resources together in different ways creates different solutions. And there'll be, millions of resources and millions of needs kind of thing, right? From which we can create, hundreds of thousands or millions of different solutions combining together different resources. And then for each of these solutions that's above the level of resources, right up here, the solution layer, for each solution, there's again kind of an explosion of 1, 2, 3, 10, 20, 50, 100 different intended and or unintended consequences coming from that solution. Is that picture conveying it all? Are you getting what I'm saying about that whole big picture? And feel free to turn on your camera if you want to hand wave.
Yeah. Let a billion flowers bloom.
Right, let a billion flowers bloom. And but again, it starts with kind of a very objective sort of reasoning through of what are all the needs. We have whole world at the very top. That means that people need to be well and the planet needs to be well. For people to be well, boom, all these needs need to be met. For the planet to be well, boom, all these needs need to be met. And then you further break it down and further break it down and further break it down until you finally get down to the level of the detail of, de-icing power lines. So that's what this whole teleological taxonomy of needs nets out to be. That much is clear, right? And I'm trying to make it a conversation. I just want to make sure that you and whatever audience watches this later on really goes, yeah, now I know what he's talking about. Is that all clear?
It's clear to me. I think it's like a garden. Stas Bob, you just basically, it's a whole ecosystem, right? Because everything's interconnected. And, but you do the groundwork and you just watch it grow.
Yeah, basically. I mean, we're basically talking about a framework here where, we've got needs coming from the top resources coming from below, combining resources to form solutions, and then doing the analysis, the detailed analysis of each solution, you know, what are the intended consequences, and let's create that mapping so we can quantify, you know, in this case, combinations of helicopter time, gallons of fuel, you know, barrels of de-icing agent, et cetera, that combination, that precise combination will result in, you know, so much de-icing of so many, you know, kilometers of power line, whatever, for example. That's the intended consequence. But then what about all the unintended consequences? How do you quantify those, et cetera? And of course, you know, those unintended consequences will depend on where exactly you're doing this implementation. So for example, noise pollution. Noise pollution might be a big deal if it's done in an urban area, but if it's way out in some, you know, desolate area where there's no people and even no wildlife that could be bothered by it, okay, maybe it's not such an issue. You see what I'm saying?
Jamin, if a tree falls and nobody's there to hear it, does it make a sound?
well, yes. And but the key question is, what are the impacts of that sound? Is there any wildlife that's impacted by that sound, and et cetera? So we're looking for tangible impacts that map to the needs that we've identified coming from the teleological taxonomy of needs coming from above.
That's what I've been saying this whole time.
Okay. But anyway, so we got needs, resources, solutions, and then the mapping of that solution. Where does that, how exactly does that map to all the different needs that are coming from above, right? That's the mapping we're talking about. And then I'll just stay on camera here because it's kind of more fun. But the global holistic model basically says, okay, first of all, let's take a complete scenario. Got all these resources, all these different possible solutions. Now, with all these different possible solutions, one scenario would be, yes, we're going to implement this solution. No, we're not going to implement this one. Yes, we're going to implement this one and this other one, and no to the next three, and yes to this one, etc. And then for each solution that we are going to implement, we've kind of got like a dial that says how much of this one, how much of this other one. And so a scenario is not just which solutions, but which and how much. Is that clear?
Yes, there's a quantitative dimensionality.
Exactly. So
and it can be measured.
Exactly. And in the case of a scenario, it's not just measured, it's actually prescribed. In other words, we're saying, what if we were to apply this solution in this precisely quantified degree? Then with that degree of implementation of that solution, there's a corresponding, you know, multiplicative effect in the consequences or the impacts of that solution on all the different needs and problems that we're trying to address from above. So, it could be straight linear or it could be nonlinear consequences. All of that is figured out in the mapping from any one particular solution to the numerous needs and problems that it impacts up above, right?
Multiplicative.
That's straight linear, right? In other words,
that's a big word.
Yeah. I mean, you know, and in many cases, if not most, it is linear, right? If you burn, twice as many barrels of oil, you're going to have twice as much carbon emissions in the atmosphere using this particular method of burning or this technology of combustion or whatever that's inherent to this one particular solution that we're looking at, that we're evaluating. So, as an engineer with a lot of training and experience in systems, designing systems and optimizing the systems and all that, all this has a tremendous amount of appeal to me, as I think it will to a lot of other engineers, because it's kind of like, oh, okay, cool. So really conceptually anyway, we've got like this massive indexing of all the world's resources. We've got a complete repertoire of different possible solutions that we could be implementing. And for each of those possible solutions, we've got a mapping from the solution to the various needs and problems, both the positives and the negatives. And then we can kind of, tweak and, I kind of imagine a little checkbox for each solution. Are we implementing the solution? Yes or no? If yes, click the checkbox. And then you go straight to the dial and you dial up or dial down the degree to which you're implementing that solution. How many millions of acres of hemp are we going to be growing, for example, if hemp is one of the solutions, which it well should be. And so it's like, all right, well, we can dial up the hemp production. Let's correspondingly dial down cotton production. In other words, think of this as truly a model of the entire world, where we've got all the world's resources down here, all the world's needs, people's needs, planet's needs, ecosystems needs up here. And the solutions are kind of like the glue that connect the resources to the needs. Is that a helpful analogy?
Yeah, I think it's clear. It makes it clear.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Or more clear anyway. I think this kind of visual representation and sort of a mathematical model is useful.
Yeah.
If nothing else, to tell the story.
Yeah. Exactly. And the thing is, I've got literally years of experience building these kinds of systems. Not just the systems themselves that model, things to other things, like solutions to needs in this case. But on top of that, I have experience building what I call optimization layers. So imagine that we've got all these solutions. One way to play with different scenarios and try to find the best scenario is to just kind of manually go around turning on and off solutions and tweaking the dials and all that. Then let the simulator run, and it does all its supercomputer churning and spits out the results. And the results might be, well, you've met these needs, but you haven't met these. You've solved these problems, but these other problems have actually gotten way worse, et cetera, et cetera. And then you go back to the drawing board and you try different combinations and, and different degrees with the dials and everything like that. My point is that could be an infinite exercise that never gets us to the ultimate outcome that we need. However, if we build an optimization layer, the optimization layer can then automatically tweak. Essentially, it automatically does the tweaking and the check marking and the uncheck marking and the experimenting. Using such technologies as evolutionary programming and various other modeling and optimization techniques, AI techniques, etc., to find the optimal solution. But what we're actually looking for is not just the optimal solution relative to the resources and solutions that we have, but we want a complete solution that solves all the world's problems and meets all of the needs of humanity and the planet thoroughly. And when I say solves all the world's problems, I mean solve them to the extent that they can be solved physically, and at a minimum puts us on a path towards a sustainable, peaceful future, if not an outright utopia.
Hey, Jamie, do you mind if we pause for just a moment? We can come back to this, but one of the things that I've been wanting to sort of talk with you about is this notion of solving things to the extent that they're physically possible.
Yeah.
Yes, to the extent that they're possible.
Yeah.
Physical, I think, doesn't. I think it's redundant.
Yeah.
It's redundant, and it's also a bit obscure, kind of obfuscating, because it's kind of like well, to the extent that they're physically possible, it's like, well, what does that mean, right? I mean, it's either possible or it isn't possible. It doesn't matter whether it's physically possible or possible. I mean, yeah, I'm I'm somebody who thinks everything has a physical basis. So sure, it's gonna be either possible physically or not, and therefore possible or not.
Yeah. I appreciate you bringing that up, because it shows that that's something that needs some work at a minimum. But basically, first let me tell you where I'm coming from with that, and then at least you know where I'm trying to communicate. And then we can see if there's either a better way of communicating it or a whole different paradigm of looking at it. But where I'm coming from is, people will say, well, it's impossible to end hunger. Well, no, it's not impossible to end hunger. It's certainly physically possible. So, if someone came to me with an argument that it's physically impossible to end hunger, okay, that's a whole different level of impossibility than say, oh, it's politically impossible, or oh, it's culturally impossible, or oh, it's sociologically impossible, or whatever, right? I'm saying, look, let's respect physical constraints, but let's not be too beholden to other imaginary constraints. So that's where I'm coming from. And when I say physically possible, I mean, I truly mean it really is physically possible to solve pretty much all of the world's problems, with certain exceptions. What are the exceptions? If a species has gone extinct, then it's physically impossible to bring that species back. Right now, of course,
right now it may be possible in the future.
That's true. That's true. So anyway, I guess what I'm saying is, anyway, well, I've said what I have to say about that.
Oh, okay. Well, let's come back to it.
There you go. Yeah, we're using the spiraling method, so we'll come back,
because it's an expression that you've used, I think, ever since I've known you, and I never really stopped you and asked you about that. Now I have, and we'll come back to it again.
Perfect. So anyway, back to the optimization layer basically says, given these solutions, given these resources, and given these solutions, let's, play with the degree in which solutions and the degree to which we implement them, and see what the results are, and try to find the best possible mix of these solutions possible to achieve the highest degree of achievement of all the goals and solutions of problems that we're setting out to achieve. In other words, the maximum degree of achievement of the telos, or the aim, right? And then I make the point in the document, I'll just talk from memory here, that because so many of our problems are so big, so deep, so wicked, as some people like to call these mega world problems, like overpopulation, hunger, poverty, war, climate change, etc., that the existing repertoire of solutions may actually be simply insufficient for for solving the world's problems. We may need to come up with new solutions. We may need to invent new solutions, and that's where a lot of the work of Dr. Tony McCaffrey, Brainswarming, and then this book that I just got, Reinventing Discovery by Michael Nielsen. Amazing stuff. This is all about that, I'll just call it that other aspect of radical collective intelligence, which is the creation part. So basically everything we've talked about up until now, starting from needs and resources and solutions, yes, these solutions are created, so that is a creative part. But once they've been created, they kind of enter this matrix. Think of this whole thing as this multidimensional matrix, and set of mappings between needs, resources, solutions, etc. What we're now talking about is the creation of new solutions, the invention of new solutions. And that's where the work of brainstorming, Tony McCaffrey, Reinventing Discovery, and other resources like Group Genius by Professor Keith Sawyer, that's where all these come into play. And in fact, what we're doing is we're essentially assimilating all these different methodologies, techniques, paradigms into this common radical collective intelligence framework so that we can build and implement the tools, systems that are needed for the community to be able to self-organize. And, you know, experts in agriculture and plant biology and all that to work on the solutions related to agriculture and conservation. Meanwhile, you know, the mechanical and electrical engineers and physicists work on power generation and distribution that's sustainable and actually healthy for the planet, et cetera, et cetera. So what these great resources are all about is how do we, you know, build these online communities and architect them in such a way that that they create precisely the patterns of online collaboration that are needed in order to rapidly and efficiently generate more solutions, better solutions, or take existing solutions and improve upon them, right? Leveraging all the expertise of all of humanity in order to make that happen. So, and that's kind of where we're doing a lot of our deep diving right now. And what's interesting is a lot of the very solutions that we're planning on building to operationalize radical collective intelligence and take it to new levels so that it can continue to scale and assimilate more and more people. A lot of these very technical solutions that we're going to be building, they are solutions too. And so they're going to build upon the creation of those solutions will build upon whatever pre-existing solutions existed that facilitated their building. Back to your Chinese proverb, yeah, that it takes one axe to make another axe. You need one axe, you know. So it takes one axe to make a second axe. Well, it takes, you know, one set of collaboration tools to facilitate the collaboration that results in the invention of the next generation of tools, and so on. So we're constantly going to be improving upon our tool set of radical collective intelligence. And that gets us back to the virtuous cycle where you have the collective intelligence itself, you have the solutions that it's creating. For the virtuous cycle to really kick in, our position right now with Radish, you know, yours, mine, and our other Radish colleagues at present is our view is that to get the virtuous cycle going, we need solutions that are truly meaningful to the majority of humanity, such as solutions to world hunger, right? In other words, if we get out there and say, hey, we're working on all these solutions to improve collective intelligence, people might just kind of go yawn, like, collective intelligence, what's that? I haven't heard of that, whatever. But if we say, hey, we're coming up with solutions to world hunger, then we get people's attention. And that, I think, is a very powerful way to attract people in general to the collective intelligence, because then it's like, okay, now this thing called collective intelligence, which I might have ignored previously, since it is being presented as a vehicle for achieving the end of world hunger, okay, now I'm more open to learning about it, talking about it, listening, right? Does that make sense? I don't know if your no, your microphone's not muted. I wonder if you're having a connection issue or something.
Can you hear me now?
Now I can hear you. Now I can hear you.
Okay, got it. Okay, good. Yeah.
So, I mean, does that all make sense to you?
Yeah, it's totally coming together.
Yeah, I mean, so it's kind of like we're operating at different levels. There's the level of intelligence that we're operating at, and that includes the tools, the systems, the technologies that facilitate and promote the emergence and growth of collective intelligence. Then there's the level of, solutions that we're creating with that collective intelligence, solutions to all kinds of problems. And then there's the level of implementation, where the rubber hits the road. We're actually implementing these solutions in the real world, generating real impacts, getting people's attention because of the positive impacts that we're generating, and making people ask, how did that come to be? Let me look deeper. Oh, it's coming from this thing called, radish collective intelligence, as the case may be. Okay, wow, let me find out more about radish. And just by the very process of them finding out about it, they're actually participating in it because they've increased their knowledge of it, and that impacts the global consciousness of it. And that's a very positive thing.
Amen with a J.
Yeah, so there's the virtuous cycle. So we're simultaneously working on collective intelligence, solutions, and implementation of solutions. So at this point, let me go back to the screen share thing, and we'll just take another look at the Word document, see if there's anything else to say about that. So I've talked about a lot of this stuff already. Global holistic modeling, the net impact of all these different solutions. Yeah, we basically, how do we solve all the world's problems from the perspective of solutions and global holistic modeling, et cetera? We keep on developing solutions and complete scenarios, which are combining solutions together, and modeling each of these complete scenarios via the global holistic modeling capability until we have converged upon a scenario with its constituent solutions, which meets all of the needs of humanity and the planet and solves all of the known problems of the same. It's really as simple as that. And then I talk about how, to get there, we're going to need a really impressive set of solutions, right, to solve all the world's problems. It's not enough just to have a really tight global holistic modeling capability and the ability to map existing solutions to problems and needs. But we actually need to be able to solve these problems. And for that, we need really great solutions. And that's precisely why we are so laser focused on developing radical collective intelligence. We need an exponentially growing form of intelligence that grows to be so powerful that it has the capability to come up with this desperately needed, impressive set of solutions that I mentioned above. So we really need to pour on the intelligence. And that's why we're bringing in what I refer to as these giants of thought of Dr. Tony McCaffrey, Dr. Michael Nielsen, as their work points the way to critical parts of the overall radical collective intelligence, which need to be built for this all to come together. And then I go off on that, especially as we're reading through Reinventing Discovery. And, Dr. Nielsen in Reinventing Discovery is talking about many of the different ways that have been deployed to bring the exact set of experts together needed to make the exact set of what he calls micro contributions needed to move the solution forward. and I'll talk about I'll switch to camera mode here and talk micro contributions for a minute. So for a lot of these solutions, I've sometimes used the analogy of like a combination lock, where instead of, like 3 numbers that you have to go twist, 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 and then boom, the master lock pops open. It might be more like 300 different 300 different sequences, a sequence of 300 different numbers. I'm just using that as a metaphor, analogy, whatever. But the idea being that each of those, numbers in the sequence, in my analogy, is analogous to a micro contribution by a specific expert who comes in right at the moment when he or she is needed and says, do it this way, right? And then you get that micro contribution, which then paves the way for the next expert to come and say, oh yeah, and once you've done that, now that opens up the possibility of doing this. And everyone says, ooh, wow. And then that clears the way for the third expert to come in and say, well, wow, now that you've done that, well, that makes this possibility possible, and now do this. So it's like, it was described to me by a professor at UC Irvine one time that expertise lives on the head of a pin, right? There's this micro expertise that, each of us is really, really good at certain very specific things. And so in order to come up with a sophisticated, complete, holistic solution, any one of the millions of solutions that we're going to need to solve the world's problems, we are going to need the contributions of many, many different experts in a particular sequence, right? And that's part of the reason that we're exploring some of the different media that we're exploring, including recorded video conferences, which can then be later transcribed, etc., and having a series of such video conference meetings, that series constituting an ongoing conversation with continuity, so that long, continuous conversation can then have multiple inflection points within it where we, address wherein these different micro contributions can be made and implemented, the sum total of all of which over time results in the generation of the solution that is sought. Does that all make sense? Michael?
Yo.
Does that all make sense?
I think it's coming together very clearly. It's detailed on one level,
yeah,
as we zoom in,
yeah,
but it also hangs together in sort of a narrative form, which is helpful because, some people are going to resonate more with the story. Other people just want to see the details, right? The fine print, and so I think what we're coming up with here is a very legitimate, credible model that really can't be dismissed out of hand. It's one of those things that the only way to know whether it works is to do it.
Yeah. And the thing is, conceptually, it's kind of irrefutable. What are we saying conceptually? We're saying basically, look, let's take the world's resources. We've got all these huge problems and unmet needs, and in fact,
all these resources.
Sorry, pardon?
And all these resources.
Yeah, we got all these needs, all these resources. The solutions are this like connective tissue. This, that's where the innovation happens, in creating solutions that uses resources to meet needs in certain ways, and we need to come up with better and better solutions. That doesn't necessarily mean better and better technology. And I point again to the great work done by Alan Savory and company at the Savory Institute, where they're using like totally natural solutions of holistic land management to sequester carbon, reverse desertification, feed people. These are amazing solutions that do not involve much use of advanced technology at all. And so I just want to be clear about that point. And then another point I want to make is, just to really clarify again the distinction between existing solutions, which the existing global holistic model will use and incorporate and do the best that they can with, but really we need better solutions. And so that's where innovation and collaboration and group genius and discovery and all this stuff comes in. And so what we're essentially doing is saying, hey, let's take this conceptual framework, build it out all the way, incrementally over time, and starting with the low-hanging fruit. And I'll get back to that in a minute. But that gives us a starting point, things we can start to implement that will kick in this virtuous cycle, because this whole idea only has validity if we can actually build a global community to pursue it, to actually build it and implement the whole big framework and everything. So that's really where we're betting that the low-hanging fruit solutions that we're implementing now, like Community Cafe, Sato Hemp, Triple C, etc., will create enough attention, enough conversation, enough discussion that enough people will come and look and join, and some of those will join, and we'll be on our way to building even more and better solutions and building out this framework. At first, we might just build out the framework just for maximize the solution of other problems, but the goal is kind of a preliminary goal. First, we're focusing on permanently eradicating world hunger. That's the one thing that we want to make sure that we achieve and that we don't skimp on. In the process, we may not completely solve and reverse the problems of climate change, but we may make very good progress towards that goal. So we may score 100 on ending hunger, but we may only score a 25 on reversing climate change. What I'm saying is that's still great. Why? Because A, we've ended hunger, B, we've made progress towards ending climate change, and C, we've pointed the way to how holistic and holistic solutions generally can and in fact do work. So we prove the case with hunger, but never in isolation. It's a holistic focus on ending hunger, as I've said elsewhere, right?
Hey,
how does that all go?
Yeah, that's one more thing I just want to flag to come back to. In addition to the phrase solving problems to the extent that it's physically possible, the other one I want to just add to that short list is solving or eradicating hunger holistically. But we'll come back to that.
Sure. Yeah, anytime you want.
Just I think the reason why I bring those things up now is because we're getting ready to share what we're doing with the world, and so some of those finer points may actually matter to a certain extent. I don't want to over exaggerate, but it has more to do with the presentation than anything else.
Yeah, that's fine. Like I said, whenever you're ready to get into the details of that, I'm happy to.
Okay, yeah, we'll do it soon. I just don't want to interrupt the flow.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Okay. So really we're operating on multiple levels here. We're painting the big picture and big framework. That's a big part of our motivation, but then we're also saying, look, we're starting in this focused area that builds towards that. I think that's very compelling because at first glance, the big framework might just seem too daunting. Maybe even it may seem impossible, right? Well, for those, I think they'll find the Hungerless Games a very appealing place to focus initially, um, and because it's totally compatible with the big picture. In fact, it's the Hungerless Games is a strategy, and as such, it is a solution. Solutions can be strategies, they can be platforms, programs, or other forms. This one solution is a strategy, which depends on various other programs and platforms like CCC, like Sato Hemp, like community cafes, compassionate communities, etc. And it does have a holistic focus on ending world hunger, and that's why we say ending world hunger holistically, and I know you have stuff to say about that at some point.
Yeah, within a holistic framework. A holistic, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, we go from hunger towards all the world's problems in sort of a continuous way, right? Definitely an incremental, monotonic, growing, increasing way. So that's why it's designed to be as it is. One thing that's really interesting and really notable is that all of these solutions have been built, and mostly in the last 2 years, with a team that has grown to around a dozen of us actively engaged at any one given time. Some people have come and gone, but it's about a dozen. And so my thinking is when we go from a dozen to hundreds to thousands, wow, still preserving. I'm sorry, I thought you were trying to say something there. But as we build it out, then we'll have just exponentially growing intellectual horsepower, diversity of perspectives, which are a key measure of intelligence, and the more people you have who have access to all the different conversations that are ongoing. You have conversations about solutions, conversations about the very technologies of radical collective intelligence itself, conversations about modeling, conversations about needs and how they can best be broken down and mapped, conversations about resources, exactly what resources do we have. All these different conversations can be ongoing and recorded, whether they're text conversations in like a discussion forum context or a series of recorded video conferences that forms one long continuous conversation that goes out into the future. People will be able to plug in to exactly those conversations where they can make the most have the biggest impact of contribution. And another important point is that their contributions will be recorded, right? As a social species, the way I think about it in real simple terms, A, we're benevolent. We want to help other people because we're a social species. And B, we're selfish. When we do help other people, we kind of like to get the credit for it and be thanked, right? And, so our social capital increases, et cetera.
Arigato.
Right. So anyway, all these.
Arigato gozaimasu.
Exactly. So anyway, that's pretty much what I wanted to cover today. Let me just go back to the Word document and see if there's anything else that's notable. And this is all up on the website on the page Radical Collective Intelligence on radish.org.
I like it.
Yeah.
It's we're differentiating CI and radical CI, not only in name, right?
Yeah.
But in deed, in terms of the way it works, what it does, etc.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Like we're giving it its own, form, its own kind of it's distinct. It's like this is radical collective intelligence in action.
Yeah, exactly. And so just to briefly look at it, what is radical collective intelligence as distinct from collective intelligence? Number one, it's got a global framework. It's got a framework that looks at all of the needs of people on the planet. It looks at all the resources, on planet Earth, including all the people. It looks at all the solutions that have been developed to date, right? Well, in fact, one thing I didn't mention about global holistic modeling is there's, kind of like the baseline of what is ongoing presently, right? A cement plant that's burning hydrocarbons, generating so many, millions of tons of cement per year. That's an ongoing thing, right? It's gobbling up this much limestone and this much clay and this much hydrocarbons. It's spewing this many greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, and it's producing this many millions of tons of hydraulic Portland cement, which are then mixed with sand, gravel, water, and admixtures to make this much concrete, which has these impacts on the planet in terms of reflection of sunlight back to space, absorption of heat, et cetera, as well as forming crucial parts of buildings and transportation networks and water systems and whatnot, which themselves are ongoing solutions, right, to problems that people had perceived. So we have this ongoing nature of existing solutions, and to that we're adding new solutions. In some cases, these are substitutes, like we're substituting out cotton and we're bringing in hemp, right? That's one of the low-hanging fruit solutions, right? In fact, we're kind of kickstarting this whole process of radical collective intelligence innovation and optimization of the planet by starting off with some very, very simple solutions. One is a solution to substitute out cotton, which does tremendous damage in aggregate, and substitute in hemp, which is vastly more healing to the planet. Hemp is healing. Cotton is destructive, period. Hemp is healing in numerous ways. So we're doing that substitution led by Sato Hemp and Triple C, putting compassion in fashion and taking 100% of the profits from those operations and funding the community cafes, which are all about A, ending hunger, B, ending hunger holistically, meaning in such a way that we source from regenerative agricultural networks, which in turn are healing to the planet, healing to ecosystems, sequester carbon, use less water, et cetera, et cetera. So all of those operations are done with this holistic focus on ending world hunger. But the holistic means, at a minimum, not just cognizant of, but proactively addressing and solving other problems in parallel while we go about ending hunger.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, so I'm just kind of fleshing out, what is radical collective intelligence? Well, it's the framework, it's the starting point, it's having a plan and a strategy for going from the starting point to the whole.
Yeah, I think that last part's crucial. The whole. You can have a collective, right, or a collection of something that isn't necessarily complete, right? You can have a collection of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not a complete set of either everybody, who's a part of the social circle, or even everybody in the world, right, living or not.
Yeah.
So I think with radical, it strives, it aims for completeness, right? To be so that it covers all the ground or territory.
Yeah.
Right. And in some ways, that's the difference between just collective intelligence in general, where you could say, okay, well, let's say there's two people working in tandem, perhaps along with some software or something. So they have some form of AI. So there's the relationship between them and their, machines and one another. Okay, well, that's collective intelligence, right? But if it doesn't strive towards including all intelligence, right, everywhere, and all of the latest technologies, and even primitive ones like Alan Savory is advocating for, and all the topics, all the, if it doesn't, if it strives towards completeness,
Yeah.
then it's radical.
Yeah.
So that's sort of another definition of the word whole.
Right. And I would say, completeness includes another key term, which is inclusivity. So completeness includes inclusivity. It's not just complete about in terms of solving problems. It includes all of humanity in the process, right?
Yeah, it doesn't leave anybody or anything out.
Exactly.
It may not, in and of itself, it may not be complete, but it's striving towards completeness, right? It's that utopian impulse for perfection.
That's it. Yeah, that's really that's probably the one thing that truly sets it apart from traditional collective intelligence is the striving for completeness.
That's right.
Strives for completeness. That's key.
It doesn't content itself with half measures.
That's right.
It's not a circumscribed form of CI.
Exactly.
It's the full enchilada.
That's right. And until it's and until it is complete, it's not complete, meaning that the topic is not done until this completeness has been achieved, and therefore any plans that are proposed are to be treated as beginnings of plans until we truly have the holistic plan, which everyone is confident will get us to that completeness. It still may take us a number of years to get from here to there, but I posit there will be a moment when we feel that we really do have a plan that will get us to completeness. We may be there now with the elements of radical collective intelligence that we've already designed, because even though we're just building the community and building the solutions, we have a plan for complete build out of community and solutions. Right? So even though we're at very early stages right now, one could say that the plan is radical.
Absolutely.
Is the plan complete? I don't know that. I can't say that it is, and I can't say that it isn't. Maybe you have it.
It's like root down, right? So long as you're rooting down, you're radical. That doesn't mean that you've gotten to the root.
Yeah. So striving for completeness, and another way of saying it is the utopian impulse.
Yeah, the utopian impulse for perfection. So perfection comes from a Greek word that means complete.
Wow. So perfection is completeness.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And we've as a species, we've strayed so far from completeness because we've been operating in this extremely fragmented individualist modality with little or no regard to the planet and little regard for other people. So we're so far from that right now that it may occur to people as kind of like this impossible dream, but as we start implementing, which we have been, and as we communicate, which is what we're doing now, we're finally now taking this to the world and focusing on messaging it. Then our conviction is that people will see the beauty, the meaning, the behind everything that we're doing, and say, "Wow, I'd like to be a part of that conversation." Right?
Yeah, and I suppose one way of looking at it is the completeness itself is dependent upon people joining, right? Because they bring their intelligence, their resources, their perspective with them. And
That's right. That's right.
So in a sense, it grows at pace with the growth of Radish CI.
Yes. Yes.
At least that's what it looks like from one point of view.
Yeah. That's one measure of completeness. Is not the completeness as distinct from the completeness of the solutions and the application of those to solve the world's problems. Way over here, you've got completeness at the level of participation, right? Are all the people participating and being a part of it? Right?
It's kind of like a personal computer in every home.
Kind of like that. It's a radical collective intelligence connection in every heart and every mind, right?
It's like an octopus that has a tentacle in every heart.
That's right. A tentacle in every heart. People are going to love that, Michael. Great one. I sure want an octopus tentacle in my heart. Doing what? I don't know. But yeah, it's a tentacle in every heart and every mind and every being. And saying, hey, you matter. You matter to us. You matter to all of us. You matter to the world. You are part of the world, and we're not complete without you, right?
That's right. So it's also inclusive in that sense.
Yeah, exactly. So radical inclusivity. Radical inclusivity, and then we can talk about the dimensions of radical inclusivity at the level of membership and participation, at the level of modeling, global holistic modeling, at the level of human needs of the planet all being met. Anyway, there's just inclusivity no matter how you slice it. What peanuts are to Snickers, inclusivity is to radical collective intelligence.
Yes.
No matter how you slice it, it comes up inclusivity.
There will be peanut butter.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, is there anything else you'd like to talk about, Michael? Because I actually need to get rolling here pretty quick.
No. I think there's some very good work going on here. The quality is very high. I mean, in terms of it's very substantive. We're not. Yeah. I don't really feel like we're spinning our wheels. But yeah, as like I've said, my goal is to settle down somewhere so I can concentrate. And
let me stop broadcast. Let me stop recording.
I forgot. Yeah.
In case other people see this. So anyway, Adi, you got the. So I'm not going to hang up. I'm just going to stop recording. Okay. So arigato gozaimasu to you, Michael, and to everyone watching, and we'll see you on the next Hangout. Arigato gozaimasu.